everyone, and we are watching the next Rebel Eaters Club. It looks like we only have two full podcasts left, and then we have two bonus podcasts that will probably be their own separate videos, but will only require one video for each of those. So altogether we have 2, 4, 5, 6 more videos devoted to Rebel Eaters Club, and then I'm thinking I'm gonna just table this for now because Virgie is a bit exhausting, as a couple of you have even noted. And while I want to get through the first season just so we have a clear breaking point of it, this is getting rather tiresome, and I just don't even know how to deal with Virgie as much anymore. Today we're looking at Pleasure is Power with Shae Neary. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Hey everyone, it's Virgie. I wanted to take a minute to acknowledge the stress we're all going through right now. This moment of uncertainty is bringing up all sorts of stuff for everyone. I've been hearing from a lot of friends who are feeling drawn to old restriction habits or have deep-rooted fears coming up around not having enough food. I know those feelings can be really unsettling. And I also know that everyone needs a reminder that they are not alone sometimes. So I'm going to say it. You are not alone. I am here. We're all in this together. I wanted to return to how Rebel Eaters Club started, with the hopes that we could help you thrive through fearless interrogation and intimate conversations that centered the human relationship to food. When the coronavirus state of emergency was called last week, I went back and listened to each episode. If I'm honest, I think I was doing it out of fear that everything we had discussed was now irrelevant. But what I realized as I listened was there is nothing farther from the truth. Family, history, sustenance, wisdom, humanity, love, justice. These are what's at stake in this show, and they're what's at stake in the world right now. I hope that as we finish out the season, you will be moved, maybe in a different way than before, to ask important questions of yourself and our culture. And I hope that the show can be a source of laughter, fun, and comfort. If you want to reach out, our email address is rebeleatersclub@gmail.com, and our phone number is 862-231-5386. Here's the show. When I was 4 years old, I had a boyfriend named Ray Ray. We'd met in our Tiny Tots preschool. Ray Ray was the smallest kid in the class, and I was the biggest. I can't entirely remember how our love connection began, but knowing me, I probably initiated with a pickup line that went something like, "Guess what? I like you. You're my boyfriend now." Back then, I lived in a world where I was the hottest, funniest, smartest girl on the planet. I had swagger, and
Okay, I'm sorry. So, the whole boyfriend-girlfriend thing with young kids, I've never seen it with 4-year-olds. In general, I don't typically see it that way, but that being said, I have seen it with kindergarten, so it's not unheard of for it to happen with 4-year-olds preschool age. But to say that at 4 you thought you were the hottest is weird. A 4 or 5-year-old's concept of boyfriend and girlfriend is different than an adult's concept of boyfriend and girlfriend. Hot, at least in my experience, when kids talk about having a boyfriend or a girlfriend, it doesn't really come into the picture. They're more often mimicking adults at that age and they don't connect like hot or cute as much. It could be that they are attracted to a classmate, but it's not the same as an adult. It just isn't. And Virgie's narrative of herself is constantly contradictory, because wasn't it also at 4 years old that she said that she thought she was the hottest, that she had swagger, but then she was also in the book, in the very first chapter that we read, after the introduction, she was talking about how she felt excluded because this boy wouldn't look up her skirt. So, it's just weird all the way around, because she always hones in on these very young kids and talking about romantic or being hot or going so far as to sexualize interactions, which just raises alarm bells for me in general. But on top of that, she's also very contradictory in her narratives. Which is it, Virgie? were you this small, meek victim that overcame that to let your true personality shine as this loud, confident woman? Or were you always this way and had to overcome and had to fight actively against fat phobia even as a young child? Those two narratives don't are competing with each other simply because you've put these same ideas at the same ages. You can't be both meek and feel excluded, but then also think, according to you, at 4 years old, you thought you were the hottest and best person and had swagger and all of that. Like, which is it?
And Ray Ray was 100% there for it. My friends in Tiny Tots hadn't been taught body shame or fat phobia yet, so no one thought our relationship was weird or worthy of commentary.
You were 4. You were 4. Nobody thought our relationship was weird or worthy of commentary. You were 4. Like, chances are it didn't even register, and I'm honestly wondering, because this was 4 years old, because it was so long ago, and I'm not even 100% confident on her memories of this, because memories can be influenced the more you revisit them over the years. Was it just that you perhaps showed a liking for this kid and maybe he reciprocated, maybe he didn't, but it wasn't like this way of her framing this story is a very adult way of framing a relationship, and it's just different for kids.
None of Ray Ray's friends told him he shouldn't be dating a girl who was way bigger than him.
Because he was 4. And quite frankly, I'm not convinced that at 4 either one of you fully understood the term boyfriend, girlfriend, or dating. I'm not convinced of that. There's nothing you can say that convinces me of that.
Ray Ray didn't feel like he needed to hide his love for me. And
Ray Ray was 4 and probably just wanted you to share your ice cream with him.
I didn't think twice about the fact that this boy I was in love with probably wouldn't be able to pick me up and carry me across the threshold on our wedding day.
Because you were 4. Like, I'm sorry. The concept of picking you up and carrying you across the threshold, kids don't think in terms of other people's abilities. Like, that doesn't, the ability to think from another person's perspective, let's just take this scene wholesale. At 4, it is not really developmentally possible for her, unless she's exceptionally progressive at this age in her development, for her to conceptualize Ray Ray's ability to carry her, because that requires her to think about something from Ray Ray's perspective. I have dealt with kindergarten, first grade, second grade. It isn't until late first grade, early second grade that kids begin to understand the concept of other people's abilities. For the most part, up until that point, they don't understand how someone can't see something from their perspective. We have to teach them that, but it still does not fully click. Like, they'll understand it slightly, like they'll get the gist of it, but it doesn't fully click until they're a little bit older. You didn't think about it that way, not because you were just so innocent of fat phobia, but because you were developmentally incapable of it.
Like I'd seen on TV. I hadn't learned shame about my body, and he hadn't learned to be ashamed of his innocent desire. It all just flowed.
Oh, we're framing it as desire for 4-year-olds. Oh, that, I did not like that. That creeped me out.
After Ray Ray, I would go on to learn that my body was seen as undesirable. And that made me forget how to sparkle. I forgot how to live my life unapologetically. Today, I'm talking with someone.
Honestly, I think part of it, though, is just that you became more self-aware. Kids aren't really able to conceptualize other people's view of themselves, again, until they're a little bit older. That actually starts probably a little bit earlier, but not much earlier. It wasn't that fat phobia made you lose your sparkle. It's that, as with all children who start out, like the vast majority of children, start out pretty confident in themselves and that their views are 100% right all of the time, their actions are justified all of the time, barring adult intervention. Like, if we're just talking just among peers, kids will always view that they are the ones that are right, with very few exceptions. When they get a little bit older and they understand the concept of other people viewing their actions and understanding other people's perspectives, they can develop a level of insecurity around their actions or how they will be perceived, because it's new for them. So, while I'm sure that Virgie had to deal with some bullying that probably led to a level of insecurity, part of it could also just be that she became more self-aware.
One who lives her life with zero apology.
Hello.
Shae Neary is a plus-size model who lives and works in New York City. Shae, do you have your treat?
I do have my treat. I see honchos and cheese fries.
I got like an extra little bit of onion add-on too. It's like there's that
What are
little bit
these
of
special
crunch.
fries you have over there?
Yeah, I know. It's like magical fries. I ordered them from a computer.
Tater tots and onions and sauce.
Why do they always get so giggly and like clearly, I mean, it's a little weird how overly giggly and excited they get over each snack that they present. I mean, every time they're giggling and they're clearly like really excited about the food. It's a bit weird. I understand being excited for your favorite food or what have you, or a special snack, but this happens literally every podcast where Virgie especially is like very giggly and very excited over the food. It's weird.
Awesome shit, bitch. I'm in Brooklyn. I got French fries with white American cheese melted on.
I wanted to talk to Shae about desire, about how we are drawn toward the things that give us pleasure and comfort and healing, including food. So do you want to take a delicious, loving bite together?
Sure.
Make sure it sounds extra delicious and juicy.
So make it sound sexual. Wait.
See, even someone who doesn't typically talk with Virgie is like, oh, so you want to sexualize the food. Okay, and then apparently she's down for it. And then they get up, people like Virgie will then get upset over being fetishized. You are fetishizing your act of eating. If you don't want to be pursued by feeders, don't fetishize food and don't fetishize you eating food.
I am a former sex worker. I wonder if I can make cheese fries sound sexual.
I'm sure you could.
Ooh, hold on, I'm trying. These are really good.
Yes. Yeah. So like, wait, so can we back up? So when we were talking about the snack we were going to get you, you were like honchos, but only the ranch flavor. Can you discuss your relationship to this item?
Honchos are my drug. Like if I like I can't describe the innate love I have for honchos.
But they're a tortilla chip? What is this?
They are.
It's like a Dorito?
They're kind of like Doritos, but like the old school ones. Before they started like spraying on the flavoring, the hand tossed Doritos, that's exactly what they taste like.
Oh, I love that. So let's back up, like pre-honchos.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you?
Shae is a 32-year-old plus-size transsexual from Pennsylvania in the Poconos, and she's a busy gal. She works as an office manager for a large advertising company in Flatiron, and as a model when she's not doing those things. You know, she's a busy gal. She got things to do.
Yeah, so actually, I want to drill down on something you said. So you're known as being the first trans plus-size model to be featured in a major fashion campaign.
I am. Doesn't that sound fancy, Lord?
It
Save
is.
me.
It's very fancy. It doesn't sound fancy. It is fancy. How did you get into modeling?
It wasn't intentional. I was working in the food industry for 20 years, and a friend of mine who I worked with saw this ad in Time Out magazine, and it was like at this trans modeling agency, and he was like, "Girl, you need to apply." And I was like, "I am not applying. Like, they are not taking my fat ass." Like, I literally had this moment where I was like, no, I'm not doing it." And he like forced me like the next day to like send my pictures over, and this girl responded, she's like, "Oh, aren't you pretty?" And she's like, "Come in, we'll do some test shoots." And I got booked that like next week to be in the agency for trans models. And I came across this advertising for Cover Story. It was this woman looking for a plus trans woman to put in her ads. And I remember going to the Go-See to meet her, and I point blank was like, "Why do you want to put a fat trans woman in your ad?" And she's like, "I have tons of plus trans friends. None of them are model worthy, but in reality," she's like, "they all have wonderful personalities and they deserve to have imagery out there." And I was like, well, that sounds friendly enough. Like when the shoot went live, Refinery29 picked it up, Mike.com picked it up, AOL, Yahoo, it went all around the internet, hardcore viral. It kind of like spread like wildfire. And then I was being contacted to do other stuff. And then a UK company contacted me, and then I became the first plus size trans model to book a UK campaign.
I will say you give really good face. But this actually brings us to our meet cute. So the first time I laid eyes on you was when we were both doing that shoot for a plus size company called Dia and Co. in New York. It was this, I just remember it was this huge loft space in Chelsea. Was it Chelsea?
It was, yeah, it was Chelsea.
And I remember like walking down this long corridor for what seemed like half a mile. And then all of a sudden I heard like dozens of people, lots of people. And the craft services table was the first thing I clocked after that. And it was pretty impressive.
Right? Yeah. Shoots are fun. Don't get me wrong. They're hard work, but it's fun.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, I remember that day, like I had never seen so many lights and cameras. There were racks and racks of clothing, dozens of shoes. There was like a bunch of tables smushed together, covered in every imaginable accessory. And there were about half a dozen hair and makeup artists. And the person who did my hair, named Chucky put about 20 pounds of glorious hair extensions into my head. And I just remember like the photographer just asking me to hop around like a bunny. It's just like amazing, right? And absurd. And anyway, so you were there that day, and I probably heard your laughter first. And before long, I was listening to you tell stories and entertain everybody there. So you remember this day.
I did. Yeah, for sure. You know what's funny is I didn't want to intimidate the other girls, and I felt bad because like I had modeled all the time, and these women in the room, they had not ever modeled before. I become very different on shoots. Like I take my modeling really seriously, but when I'm behind a camera, I always say I become my character. So like my drag persona is Shae, but when I'm behind a camera is when Shae comes out. That's when like Shae is like, I'm gonna make some money now. Like pay attention to me. I will steal your focus in the frame in any shot. Like I will make you find me. So like a lot of times like women at shoots, they get like intimidated by me because I'm not afraid to like step in front of you. I will like literally shift in front of you to get the shine. Like I'll be respectful, but know who's who.
Yes. I mean, Shae, can I ask, how did you become this person?
I think years of hating yourself and then finding finding a reestablishment for your identity really like puts you in a different headspace. Before my transition, I didn't like who I was. Like I didn't like my personality. I didn't like my identity, my appearance. And then when I started my transition, I started seeing myself in the mirror the way I wanted to see myself. Not that
Okay, and like I completely get when you start your transition, you see yourself the way you want to see yourself. That's great, but how does your personality like I'm sorry, I know I haven't spoken much and we're nearing the halfway point in this, but there just hasn't been much to talk about with these guys because they're just they were first talking about their food and then we're getting introduced to Shae and then how they met. So there really just hasn't been a huge amount to talk about with these two for this first part. But I don't really understand how beginning your transition would help you rectify your issues with your personality. Like I don't really understand that. If you are a trans person and you understand this, I would, and are comfortable, of course, sharing about this. I'm curious to see, like, is that a common thing that trans people are frustrated with their personality but then begin to become more comfortable with themselves as they transition? It's just an odd thing to me. I don't fully understand it.
that I needed to change to be happy, but that I was finally recognizing the person in front of me instead of it being this like mystery individual I felt like I was living in a shell of. Like, so a lot of my attitude, a lot of my strength has come from leading a very challenging life.
Growing up, Shae says her family was pretty poor. Then, when she was 6 or 7 years old, the river next to their house flooded, and Shae and her family literally watched their home float away. After that, they moved from place to place to place, which only made a bunch of difficult family dynamics worse.
Like my parents were really, they were heavy alcoholics, heavy trauma-built individuals, like that didn't understand their past, nor did they want to deal with it. And like cheese fries, it's funny, like we talked about cheese fries, how that's one of my favorite foods. It's one of my favorite foods because it's easy to bring home from a bar. Because like you didn't really have time to cook that much when you're out drinking at a bar all day long. My parents always could bring home cheese fries. It was something like cheese fries and chicken tenders. It was like a regular dinner for me if my mother wasn't cooking. I think food is kind of a witness in some sense to your experience, and our lives are kind of catered around that. We have foods that bring us innate comfort because they were with us in times of struggle or times of positivity, and sometimes it can bring us great pleasure, and sometimes it...
Doesn't that seem more to you like a maladaptive coping mechanism, though? Like, if you say your parents were, like, severe alcoholics, and so chicken tenders and cheese fries were a big thing for you growing up because of probably a neglectful parent, quite frankly. Giving a kid constantly just fried food, to me, seems a bit neglectful. At least, she was fed, which is more than can be said about other neglectful parents. I don't know, that just seems like, okay, so you because your parents were probably largely, and granted, I don't know Shae's background, so this is me over analyzing, take it with a grain of salt. But to me, what it seems, because an alcoholic, someone who is into like substance abuse, is probably emotionally pretty unavailable to their children and are pretty consumed with themselves. Isn't it possible that Shae equated those cheese fries and chicken tenders with love because it was the only, well, maybe not the only, but like one of the primary ways her parents showed love? Isn't that like a possibility? I'm just curious.
Sometimes it can remind us of pain and things we've been through. And I think you kind of view food as you've kind of experienced it through your life. But if you become aware of when you do these things and how you eat them or what you choose to do when you're in pain or in pleasure, like then you kind of like start to choose things based off of that.
And that's a maladaptive coping mechanism. If you use food to as a form of comfort and to deal with some internal pain, it's really no different than using pot, cigarettes, beer, wine, what have you, as a way of dealing with it. I mean, it's so then to me, if you're using food as your primary form of comfort, self-soothing, as a way to deal with emotional upheaval, then perhaps you are setting yourself up for a food addiction. You didn't have the ability for other coping mechanisms as a child, because as a child you do what you can to soothe yourself. You're kind of in a powerless position. But as an adult, if you recognize that in yourself, to me, that would be either something to work on yourself if you feel capable, or get some outside help. But I don't think that using food, just because you find food comforting, doesn't mean that it's a good coping mechanism.
More on that after the break.
Well, since we reached the break, well, I'm trying to do math, and I'm not very good at it. No, we can still easily cover another few minutes of this, so we'll go ahead and cover a little bit more. They take the break several minutes before the actual halfway point. We still have plenty of time for this video, so I'm going to go ahead and let them talk a little bit more.
Everyone's got comfort foods. Things that bring us warm feelings of home, of plenty, feelings of being held and loved. Because, my God, there are few things that make me feel more amazing than a warm apple crisp with a scoop of vanilla ice cream.
And that's an issue. I so don't understand how Virgie can talk about food being comfort and describe it in such a way about being held and being, I don't know if she said the word nurtured, but that's definitely the vibe that I'm getting from her, and not see that that's an issue. You should not be associating the feelings of being held and what's essentially a human connection with food. That's an issue. That doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound right. And to me, that sounds like, and likely it partially stems from childhood, where you could not make connections that you wanted, and so you turned to food. And now you're simply trying to justify that reaction to exclusion, rather than getting a therapist to help you work through it and building up a community that appreciates you for who you are.
Or hot Cheetos with slightly melty brie. Or menudo. The way it feels to top off the bowl of soup with a small fistful of onions and cilantro, to squeeze little slices of fresh lime, the little bit of juice that dribbles down my wrist and out to anyone close enough to be in the menudo splash zone. I even love being part of the elite club of people who understand the glory of tripe, menudo's secret ingredient. We all know how strong our associations with food can be, because food is a witness to our experiences, a witness to the sweet memories and the difficult ones.
They're personifying food, and I find it very disturbing.
Eggplant parmesan. It literally is like things I will never eat again. Like the amount of fights my mother and father had over eggplant fucking parmesan. This one time, a tray of eggplant parmesan fell out of the stove because my father didn't use like a proper thing and he burned his hand. And it created this massive, massive fight where my dad got belligerently drunk and it got very abusive. And because my childhood is so built upon that, like food has become so tied into those experiences. My life has kind of been in disarray so many separate times where like I got thrown out when I was 14 and I lived with my drag mother for a large period of that time and kind of started escorting at a very young age. And nowadays, like we like even then it was considered like child prostitution, but then it was like survival for me. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I wasn't looking at it like that.
Right. I was sort of thinking about, going back to escorting and sex work. And there's kind of this, I don't know, like this fascinating binary of like good, bad, secret, public, those kinds of binaries that I feel are really at work when we're talking about sexuality and sex work. I was thinking about when I first moved to San Francisco and I was dating someone and we had this like really incredible sexual chemistry and he just worshipped my fat body in this way that was really extraordinary and that I don't think I'd ever really experienced. And it gave me so much freedom. And I was sort of falling for this person because he was so clear about his desire for my larger body.
Yeah.
And then, a little bit of time goes on. And he straight up tells me, like, listen, you're my ideal body. You're really awesome. But I do not have, he said this phrase, I don't have the balls to deal with the shit my friends are going to give me if I date you publicly. So that might
I've
make
been
me a
there.
coward,
Yeah.
but that's just the reality of the situation. And just kind of thinking about like, right, I mean, obviously how hurtful and dehumanizing it is to hear something like that. But the other side of it being like, wow, there's so many layers of the secrecy, the hiding, the closeting, whatever you want to call it.
It's you said that you felt good about yourself, like you felt like you, and then all of a sudden they didn't want you, and you're like, oh well, they're like, I'm being a coward because of this, because of what society thinks I should date and should have, and I deal with that every day. People find me attractive or want to be with me, but won't facilitate their desire. They won't actively pursue it. What they want is a societal picture. They want the imagery that will make everyone in their life happy for them, not what actually makes them happy. Because a lot of times what we desire is not innately what we want. What we want is typically a picture of what our families want for us, what our friends want for us, who will judge us to make us into who we are, not exactly what we desire, which is sometimes outside of the spectrum of what one is considered normal. I've never lived in a position where I've been considered societally normal. I'm a freak. I'm an outcast. You know what I mean? And that someone doesn't want to fall in love with an outcast. Anything that.
All right, so we're gonna leave it. Someone doesn't want to fall in love with an outcast, and to me, what seems to be an ongoing thing is that I've noticed that a lot of these fat acceptance people have traumatic backgrounds, traumatic childhoods, likely where food was a great comfort to them. And I'm thinking that this vehement anger towards anything that suggests focusing more on healthy steps is an irrational response to someone trying to take away the only coping mechanism they've ever really known. So I don't know, this whole thing has given me a bigger picture of the fat acceptance movement, and it has shown me that much like, I mean, I'm one of those people that say everyone is broken in their own special way. We all have things, we all have baggage, we all have shit that influences our behavior, likely from childhood or other traumatic experiences. The big thing is, though, is that you have to deal with those, and I think rather than dealing with their trauma, dealing with their subconscious behavior that is a result from that trauma, they cling to their maladaptive coping mechanism and then become fiercely protective of it, claiming oppression simply to hold on to this one thing that gave them comfort as a kid. This is armchair psychology. Take it with a grain of salt, but this is the general feeling that I've gotten more while watching these people and then watching some of the fat acceptance group. It still needs to be called out. This in no way absolves them of... Nope, someone's car alarm is going off. This in no way absolves them of their bad behavior. And this doesn't absolve them of not taking responsibility for their actions that negatively impact their health and then trying to blame it on other people. It helps explain it a little bit more. I hope that these people get help. I really, honestly do. But let me know what your opinions are, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.